How you doing there? And welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Daled, Daf 44 of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, Daf Mem Daled of Masechta Zevachim. We continue our exploration of the halachas of Pigul. The first section, there are 4 sections in today's Daf. The first one is all the things that are Pigul. We are going to go through all the things that are Pigul, different characteristics of things that could be Pigul. And then we discuss Pigul and the Metzora's oil. Of course, as part of the purification process of a Metzora, there's oil that is sprinkled in the azara as well as applied to the ear and the finger thumb and toe thumb of the Metzora. We will discuss if there is a possibility of Pigul when it comes to the Metzora's oil. Section number 3, interesting things kohanim can eat. That is section number 3. And finally, Pigul and inner chatases, chatas apnimius. We saw machlokes in our Mishnah between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon about if there is Pigul by a chatas apnimis. We're going to see the opinion of Rabbi Lazar, who has an interesting kind of middle opinion. Friends, that is the plan for Daf Mem Daled of Masechta Zevachim. Let us jump in. All right, friends, we are going to begin on Daf Mem Daled Amid Aleph. About, I'd say, 10 lines or so from the top of the Amid at the 2 dots. Kol sheyesh lo matirin bein la'adam bein la'mizbeach chayav and olav mishum Pigul. That when you have something that becomes permitted, whether to people, for example, the meat of a korban becomes permitted to whether the kohanim or the owner to be able to eat the meat, bein lamizbeach, or whether we're talking about the altar, for example, the emurin to be burned on the altar, chayav and olav mishum Pigul. There will be a chiyuv Pigul by these parts of the korban. Tana Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, O'eno maybe ela kayotze b'shlam. Okay, this is coming from, I believe, a brisa in Toras Kohanim, which of course is the Medrash halacha on Sefer Vayikra, that there was a possibility that when it comes to Pigul, it would apply only to korban shlamim. After all, or elakayotze b'shlamim, or similar to shlamim, as we're going to explain in a second. But after all, the pasuk from which we learn out Pigul, which I'm going to read right now, v'me'achol ye'achol, right? Right? We've dissected this pasuk in the past. The pasuk that we learned Pigul from is talking about shlamim. So therefore, says the Gemara, again, Tanu Rabbanu, maybe elakayotze b'shlamim. Maybe Pigul only applies to shlamim kinds of stuff. What's shlamim kind of stuff? Well, shlamim, of course, is eaten for 2 days and the night in between. So maybe Pigul only applies to korbanis that are eaten for 2 days and the night in between. The Gemara later on is going to explain for us what that might be. What is, if anybody knows, let us know. And we'll get to it in a little bit later on the daf. But if you know already, just blurt it out. Just yell it out if you know the answer. What's another korban that is eaten for 2 days and the night in between? So I might think that Pigul only applies to korbanis that are eaten for 2 days and the night in between. How do we know that Pigul actually also applies to korbanos that are eaten for the day and the following night, which is lots of other korbanos like korban chatas, korban osham, korban toda? Talmud Omar mi b'sar. Well, the pasuk says by Pigul, it says me'ochel ya'ochel mi besar, and mi besar is, I guess, coming to include kol sheshiyarav nechol, any korbanis that there. Oh, I guess okay, maybe that's the point. Mi besar kilu, any korban that we're talking about their meat, right? Me'ochel ya'ochel mi besar, any korban that its meat will be eaten. So korban chatas, the kohanim eat the meat. Korban asham, the kohanim eat the meat. Korban toda, the kohanim and the bailim eat the meat. So kol sheyarv nechalin. So pigul includes also korbanis where the meat is eaten. Ola shen sheyarv nechalin. What about a korban ola? Of course, nobody's eating anything when it comes to korban ola. It's all burnt on the mizbeach. So how do we know that pigul applies to korban ola? Talmud lomar zevach, it says offering, any offering, even a korban ola. Minayin l'rabbos ofis. How do we know pigul applies even to ofis? Chatas ha'of, olas ha'of, v'amenachis, flour offerings. Achani marbe log shemesh from Metzora. Maybe. Right? How do I know that pigul even applies to the oil of the Metzora? That as part of the purification process of Metzora, there's a korban asham, and the blood of the asham is then smeared. I think it would probably be smeared. I don't think is appropriate here. I think it's right. I think it would be smear. Is smeared on the ear and the thumb finger and the thumb toe, and then on top of that blood, oil is applied. It's also sprinkled. Now you can only apply that oil after the blood from the asham has been already offered. So it's kilu, the asham allows the oil to now be offered. So how do I know that pigul can apply also to the oil of a Metzora? Talmud lomar asher makdishim li. That it says in the context of tumah. Okay, the pasuk by tumah. I'm going to read you the pasuk. Daber laharin velbonov v'yinazu mi kodshe b'nei Yisrael v'leichalashim kodshi asherim makdishim li. So by kodshim, so by tumas hakodshim, it says asherim makdishim li. I guess the point is that's including all types of things that they are makdish, even birds, even minchas, even the oil of the Metzora. Okay, but that's in the context of tumas hakodshim. We're interested in pigul. V'osi noser chilu mituma. Okay, now here's where we get to work. So by tumas hakodshim, it had said that it would apply even to the birds and the minchas, etc. And by tumas hakodshim it says chilul, and it also says chilul by noser. Okay, so we make a connection between tuma and noser. Vasi pigul oven minoser, and we have exer shava between noser and pigul. It says oven by both of them. So therefore, the halacha by tuma, which is that right, asherhem makdishim, from which we learned out that by tumas hakodshim it applies even to birds, minchas, log shemen of Metzora, and through exer shava we say that the same thing applies to noser, that leftover, right? If the ofis menachis log shemen, I guess, wasn't offered at the right time, so it becomes noser. Can the log shemen become noser? I guess the ofis and the menachas can. Anyways, so that would apply to noser as well. And then we learn exer shava of oven between noser and pigul to say that these apply to pigul as well. So now, okay, gewaldig. If at the end of the day, by pigul, it's going to include all of these things, even it's not just shlomim, it's chatos and ashrim and toda and Ola and Menachis and Ofer. If at the end of the day we're coming to include all the things by Pigul, Lama Nema Shlamiyatos, then why does it bechlaus? Why are we even saying Shlamim? For the end of the day, Pigul is basically applies to everything. Lama Lach to say to you, Mashlam Yuchadim Sheishlein Matirin Bein La Adam Bein La Mizbeach. I'll tell you why it says Shlamim by Pigul, because Shlamim is unique in that Shlamim's got something for everybody. There's a murim burnt on the mizbeach. The kohen gets the chaz of a shoik. The rest of it goes to the owners. Everybody gets a part of the shlamim. So shlamim has there's a matirin bein la'adam bein mizbeach. There's matirin la'adam, that the meat becomes permitted for the kohanim, for the people, for the owners. Bein lemizbeach, and there's also part that goes on the mizbeach, and therefore av kol sheish lo matirin bein laadam bein lemizbeach chayivin lehem mishum pigul. So what we learn from that is that pigul applies when there is something that's permitted, whether it's permitted to people, whether it's permitted to the mizbeach. If it has such a characteristic, Pigul will apply. So ha'ola, for example, korban ola, dama matir as besar lemizbeach, when the blood of the korban ola is thrown on the mizbeach, so it's meat, basically, right? Korban ola is entirely burnt on the mizbeach. So post zrikas adam, that permits all the meat to now be offered to be burnt on the mizbeach. Ve'or l'kohanim, and also permits the hide to be apportioned to the priests. So we see that a korban ola has matirin to both Adam and to Mizbeach. And Pigul would apply to korban ola. Ola sa'ov, when it comes to korban ola of a bird ola is entirely burnt on the Mizbeach. Dama, when the blood is applied to the mizbech, matir is bisar la mizbech. Now the bird can be burnt on the mizbech, and therefore Pigul will apply to olas ha'ov. Chatases ha'ov, when it comes to a sin offering of a bird, which is none of it goes on the mizbech, it's entirely eaten by the kohanim. Dama matir is bisar l'kohanim. So once the blood has been applied to the mizbeach, the kohanim can now eat it. So Pigul will apply to chatases ha'ov as well. Par manasofim v'sir manasofim. When it comes to burnt cows and burnt goats, dama matir es emurein l'karv. When it comes to chatases pnimios, when it comes to par manasofim, sir manasofim, so the zrikas adam by these korbanos now allows the emurin to be burnt on the mizbeach, right? When it comes to chatases pnimios, right? So for example, par kohen mashiach. So you're going to have the zrikas adam, or the application of the blood in the heichel. We'll call it zrikas adam. Post zrikas adam, now the emurim are able to be burnt on the mizbeach hachitzon, and also after that, then the rest of it is taken out and burnt by the Beis Hadeshin. But the point for us is that the zrikas adam allows now the emurim to be burnt on the mizbeach, and therefore there is Pigul by that, by the emurim. I think, did we see that it was a machlokas if Pigul also applies to the meat itself? But it applies to the emurim. Umotziani, and what's excluded from Pigul is esa kometz. For example, the kometz by a korban mincha, because nothing permits it to be eaten. It has to be burnt. Vesalavona, frankincense, factoris, and incense. Uminchas kohanim, a korban mincha of a kohen, no part of it is eaten. It's just entirely burnt. You take the mincha, you burn it on the mizbeach. That's all you do. Uminchas kohen mashiach, also the minchas chavitin that was offered every day, half in the morning, half at night. So that was entirely burnt. No part of it ever became permitted. Uminchas nisachim, also a mincha that is brought with a korban. For example, a korban shlamim, there are nisachim that are brought with it. So you offer a flour offering. That flour offering is burnt on the mizbeach. It doesn't become permitted to anybody. V'adam and blood, all of these things that we just listed are excluded from pigul because there's no aspect of it that becomes permitted either to people or to the mizbeach, right? If you take a korban shlamim, for example, when you slaughter a korban shlamim, you can't yet just burn the emurin on the mizbeach. You have to first do Srikas Adam in order to now be allowed to burn the emurim on the mizbeach. But these examples that we just gave, there's nothing that allows it. For example, a kometz doesn't need to be permitted to burn the mizbeach. You take the kometz, you burn it on the mizbeach, right? Minchas nesachim, you bring a korban shlamim, you take the right, you take the nesachim, you burn them on the mizbeach. Right? These are not things that are offered to meaning these aren't part of things that become permitted. Right there, you just take them and you burn them. Fine. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon, Mas shlamim miyuchadin sheyesh bo al mizbeach hachitzon v'chayav and olav. Says Reb Shimon, you know what we learn out from singling, from specifying korban shlamim in the context of pigul? Says Reb Shimon, what it's saying is that when it comes to pigul, it's like shlamim in that the blood of a korban shlamim is thrown on the outer mizbeach, the mizbeach hachitzon, and therefore afkol sheyeshna mizbeach hachitzon chayav and olav mishum pigul. You're only going to be chayav for pigul if it's a korban whose blood is thrown on the mizbeach hachitzon. Yatzu parim anisofim mesirim anisofim, to the exclusion of chatases apnimios. Hol she'ein al mizbeach hachitzon kishlamim ein chayavin olav mishum pigul. This is Reb Shimon's shita. I think that we saw it in the Mishnah as well. Reb Shimon Omer kol she'ein al mizbeach hachitzon kishlamim ein chayavin mishum pigul. Yeah, that's what Reb Shimon said in the Mishnah. Says Reb Shimon that the reason why in the context of pigul shlamim is specified, it's to teach that just like by korban shlamim, the blood of the korban shlamim is thrown in the mizbeach hachitzon. So in order for a korban to be chayiv pigul, it has to be a korban whose blood is thrown in the mizbeach hachitzon. Chatases apnimios, however, par kohen Mashiach, par davar shel tzibur, seir avodah zarah, for example, their blood is not thrown on the mizbeach hachitzon. Their blood is thrown on the mizbeach hapnimi. Therefore, according to Reb Shimon, pigul is not shaykh to chatases apnimios. Amar Mai, we said earlier, kayotze b'shlamim. Right at the very beginning of the brisa, we thought to say that maybe pigul only applies to korbanos that are like shlamim. Mind you, what's like shlamim? Right? We said if it's like shlamim, that it's eaten for 2 days and the night in between. What other korban is 2 days and night in between? I didn't hear anybody shout out earlier what it was, so I guess we'll have to learn it now. So bechor denechol shneim v'la le'echad. The answer is, friends, a bechor. A bechor. A firstborn. I think it's right. A bechor. Yeah, bechor. Kesev o eiz. Bechor. What was the first one? Bechor shor o kesev o eiz, I believe. A firstborn cow, sheep, or goat that's offered as a korban. It can be eaten for 2 days and the night in between. B'mayasi, how do we know to include a bechor? How exactly is it learned from shlamim? Even mematzinu, if we're going to say, well, it's a mematzinu, it's like why not? Meaning, if we're just simply saying, well, a korban shlamim, pigul is shaykh to korban shlamim is eaten for 2 days and 1 day, with the night, 2 days and the night in between. Oh, well, guess what? A bechor is also eaten for 2 days and night in between. How cute! Let's say that just like by a korban shlamim, it's shaykh to pigul, bechor shares the characteristic in that it's also eaten for 2 days and night in between. Let's just say that just like shlamim could be pigul, so bechor could also be pigul. But you could say 1 second. One second. Korban shlamim. I can understand like Pigul is shouted to Korban shlamim. It's a pretty strict Korban. You don't just offer the Korban when it comes to shlamim. You have to do smicha. You have to lean on it. V'nisachim. It comes with libations. Minchas, nisachim, nisuchayayin. You gotta wave the breast and the thigh, I think, together with the kohen. Just like all, there's all these things, all these halachas when it comes to shlamim. And guess what? There's also pigul by shlamim. I wouldn't necessarily assume though that the same would apply to bechor, which doesn't have these things. So ella mimei ochol ye'ochol. Rather, it's learned out from a klal ufrat uklal. What's the klal ufrat uklal? Well, it says imei ochol ye'ochol. The Gemara is about to ask. This is a very peculiar klal ufrat uklal. Normally, obviously, of course, klal ufrat uklal is general, followed by specific, followed by general. Here you have he'ochol ye'ochol, which are the two klals right next to each other. Mi b'sai zevach shlamav, and zevach shlamav, of course, is a prat, specifically shlam. So basically, you have two klals and you have a prat. So we're going to treat it as a klal ufrat uklal. Again, the Gemara is about to ask, like, wait, but the two klals are next to each other. But let's not worry about that right now. You have two klals and a prat, so it's a klal ufrat uklal. So when you have a klal followed by a prat, followed by another klal, the result is going to be similar to the prat. Meaning, if you just have a klal followed by a prat, so it's limited only to the prat. So if it would say hey achol and then it would say shlamim, I would say it's only shlamim. Pigul applies only to shlamim. But because we have a hey achol and then we have a prat of shlamim and then we have ye achol, which is another klal, so it's coming to include korbanos that are like the shlamim. And just like a shlamim is eaten for 2 days and the night in between, so include all korbanos that are eaten for 2 days and the night in between, that they're shaykh to pigul, i.e. bechor. Right? But 1 second. How can we say that he'achol ye'achol mi b'sai zevach shlomav? How could that be a klal ufrat uklal? That's a klal ufrat. So Amarava says, Rabba Kedamri, b'mayrav, it's like the saying, Eretz Yisrael, kol makom shata motzei, shnei klolis asmuchim zeloze, that it's like the saying, Eretz Yisrael, that whenever you have two klals that are next to each other, hatel prat b'neim v'dunim b'chlal ufrat. When you have two klals that are next to each other, followed by a prat, it's okay. Take the prat, stick it between the two klals, and you have yourself a klal ufrat uklal, and that is how we learn out that a bechor is shaykh to pigul, because when it said because of the klal ufrat uklal by shlamim and pigul. All right, friends, moving on to the next section of today's daf, pigul and the Metzora's oil. Says the Gemara, quoting from the brisa that we mentioned earlier, ad shani marbe log shemen shel Metzora. We said that the log of oil of the Metzora is shaykh to pigul. Now the assumption is that what that means is that so when the Metzora, as part of his purification process, there's the korban asham, and the blood from the asham is applied to his ear, and I'm just going to call it his thumbs. When I say his thumbs, it means his bahonis. Could just say bahonis, but the thumbs are the thumb finger and the thumb toe, his thumbs. So his ear and his bahonis, and so the blood from the asham is applied to his ear and his bahonis. Bahonis is a funny word. Akaponim. And only once the blood of the asham has been applied to his ear and his bahonis, so then oil, right, the log shemen, oil is then applied also on top of the blood, on his ear and his bahonis. So we want to say that so the fact you're not allowed to first put the oil on before the blood of the chatas of the asham. The putting of the application of the blood of the asham on the ear and bahonis of the Metzora essentially allows, so to speak, the oil to now be put on top of that. So the concept being that the asham is being matir the oil, and therefore it's shaykh to pigul. Okay. Hamani Reb Meir. Okay, this is the opinion of Reb Meir, as we had in our Mishnah. So we had in our Mishnah. The Tani that we learn in the Brisa, log shemen shel Metzora, when it comes to the log of oil of a Metzora, chayven olav mishum pigul de Reb Meir. Says Reb Meir that there's pigul when it comes to the log shemen of a Metzora. Okay, there you have it. Reb Meir says that pigul is shaykh to the log shemen of Metzora, and therefore if the Brisa is saying that pigul is shaykh to the log shemen of Metzora, it must be Reb Meir. But Ema Sefer, but 1 second, what does it say at the end of this Brisa that this long Brisa that we learned earlier? It says, Umotzi ani minchas nisachim ve'adam asan derabbanan. But later on in that Brisa, if you remember, it said, and what's excluded from pigul is, for example, minchas nisachim. That, for example, if you bring a korban shlamim, so together with it, you bring a minchas nisachim, you bring a korban mincha together with a korban shlamim. Asan l'rabbanan. If we're saying that the minchas nisachim is excluded from pigul, well, that would be the opinion of the rabbis. The Tana that we learned about said nisrei behema. When it comes to the nisachim, the minchas nisachim, the nisuchayayin by a animal, chayav alein mishum pigul. So there is pigul for minchas nisachim. B'pnei dam azevach matiron likarev divrei Meir, because the blood of the offering allows them to be offered. Meaning, if you're bringing a korban shlamim, and with a korban shlamim there's nisachim, you can't just bring the nisachim. You can't bring the nisachim first and then the animal. No, the zrikas adam of the animal allows the nisachim to now be offered. So this is the opinion of Reb Meir. So Reb Meir argues that the minchas nisachim is shaykh to pigul, since the zrikas adam of the animal that is being offered allows now the minchas nisachim to be offered, and therefore, because it's something that's permitted by the zrikas adam of the animal, so therefore it's shaykh to pigul according to Reb Meir. So Reb Meir says that minchas nisachim is shaykh to pigul. So now, earlier in the Brisa, we had said that the log shemen of Metzora is shaykh to pigul. We want to say that that's the opinion of Reb Meir. The problem with saying that it's Reb Meir is that later on in the Brisa, we say that minchas nisachim is excluded from pigul, but Reb Meir would say that minchas nisachim is included in pigul. They said to Reb Meir, but they said to Reb Meir, but wait a second, how could it be that pigul is shaykh to minchas nisachim, and the argument being that, well, because it's the zrikas adam of the asham that now allows the minchas nisachim to be offered. But say the Rabbanan challenger, may they say, Reb Meir, there's halacha by nisrei be'ema, which is that if you offer, let's say a korban shlamim, you offer the korban shlamim today, technically you don't have to offer the minchas nisachim today. You could theoretically do it even 10 days later, in which case you're offering it on its own. It's lo kashur, it's not connected to the korban asham. The proof being that you could entirely offer the minchas nisachim separately, on its own, on a separate day, without the animal that's being offered with it. So therefore the chachamim say that it's not connected to the asham, and therefore it's not considered that the asham is being matered, and it's not shaykh to pigul according to the chachamim. Amar Lein, Reb Meir responds to the chacham, Afani lo amarti ela b'boinim hazevach. Reb Meir says, yeah, sure. When I say that minchas nisachim is shaykh to pigul, because the asham allows it to be offered, I'm talking about when the nisachim are offered together with the korban. When they're offered together, which I imagine is probably the more standard case, I imagine, I don't know, it was never in the Beis HaMikdash, but when you bring, let's say, the korban asham, and together with the korban asham, you bring the nisachim. So says Reb Meir, okay, in that case, when they're being brought together, I would say that the minchas nisachim is shaykh to pigul, since you're going to have to wait to offer the minchas nisachim until after the zrikas adam of the korban, and only after that are you permitted to offer the nisachim. But if you're bringing it on its own separately, well then, yeah, sure, I agree that there would not be pigul there. So our question is, who's the author of the brisa that we had learned earlier, that long brisa that we had learned earlier that included everything and excluded whatever needs to be excluded? So we said, look, in the brisa it includes log, shemen, shel, metzora, and that would be the opinion of Reb Meir, but it also excludes the minchas nisachim, and that would, it's the chachamim who exclude the minchas nisachim. So who's the author of the brisa? Amr of Yosef says of Yosef Amani, Rebbe says of Yosef, the author of this brisa is none other than Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the 3rd century Tana. Actually, I just looked. Whatever, I did this little exercise recently. Right? Yeah, I think Rebbe, I believe, lived between in the 3rd century. I think. Okay. Anyways, whatever. Now, so again, Amar of Yosef says of Yosef, Hamani Rebbe. This bride says Rebbe to Amar, who says, Log shemen shel Metzora matnosav Sruli. Very, very interesting. So when it comes to the log shemen shel Metzora, so Metzora is part of his purification process. Of course, you have this oil, and part of the oil is haza'ad in the, I assume it's in the azara, but right, some of the oil is sprinkled, some of it is placed on the ear and bahonas of the Metzora. What happens to the rest of the oil, friends? What happens to the rest of the oil? The answer is, it goes to the kohen. But it only goes to the kohen after the hazaz, after it's been sprinkled. So says Rebbe that I believe that is the opinion. Yeah, I don't think that Rebbe actually says that it would be pigul, but what Rebbe does say is that when it comes, okay, so you have this oil, as we're going to see in a second in a brisa. So you have this log shemen shel Metzora, and of course it's kodesh, and therefore if you can't get benefit from it, it would be me'ilah. But once you sprinkle the oil as part of the purification process of Metzora, that allows the shiyare shemen, the leftover shemen, to now it belongs to the kohen. Now it can be consumed by the kohen. So what we want to say is that from the fact that Rebbe says, so this is lo kashur to the asham, right? It's not like we were saying earlier that, well, because the log shemen by the Metzora, you need to wait till after the asham, so it's the asham that permits the log shemen. No, it's not that. It's with the oil itself is usher, or you can't get benefit from the oil itself until after the hazos, until after the oil has been sprinkled. Sprinkling the oil then allows what's left over to be consumed by the kohen. So now what we want to say is that since Rebbe's shita is that the azos of the oil then allows the remainder of the oil to be consumed by the kohen. So let's say that that's essentially a situation. So the rest of the oil, the shiraim, is something that has matirim, that the sprinkling allows it, and therefore it should be shaykh to pigul. So Rav Yosef wants to say that the author of this big brisa is Rebbe, and when the brisa says that the log shemen of Metzora is shaykh to pigul, it's because the rest of the oil becomes permitted by the sprinkling of the oil as part of the purification process with the 7 azos, then allows the rest of the oil, and therefore it's shaykh to pigul. Again, Amr of Yosef says of Yosef Amani, Rebbe, the author of the big brisa is Rebbe, the Amr who says, Log shemen shel Metzora, that when it comes to the oil of the Metzora, matnosav, the azaos, the sprinkling, Sruli permits the rest of the oil to belong to the kohen. Umidmatnosav, Sruli, from the fact that the sprinkling of the oil permits the rest of the oil to the kohen, matnosav mifaglile, also if the sprinkling was done with machshavas chutz lezmano, then it would also make the rest of the oil pigul. Titanis, we learn in a brisa, log shemen shel Metzora, when it comes to the oil of Metzora, me'alin bo. So it's shaykh to me'ila. You can't get, right? It's kodesh. You can't get benefit from. You can't just benefit on your own, rub it into your skin or whatever with the log shemen shel Metzora. It would be me'ila ad sheyizrok adam, until the zrikas adam of the asham. Once you have the zrikas adam of the asham, so now nizrak adam lo nanin v'lo mo'alin. So now already, lo mo'alin, there's no longer any me'ila by the log shemen. After the zrikas adam of the asham, there's no longer any me'ila by the log shemen, but still lo nanin, midrabanan, you don't get benefit from it. Rabbi Omer says, Rabbi, me'alin ad shitin matnosat. Rabbi, however, says that no, there's going to be me'ila for the log shemen shel Metzora until after the 7 hazaos. Only after the 7 hazaos of the oil, then the rest of the oil becomes mutter to the kohen. Right, because, and therefore there's no longer, after the 7 sprinkling, at that point there's no longer going to be me'ila either. Vishavin, now both the Tanakam and Rebbe still agree though that nonetheless lichatchila she'asu ba'achila ad shitin matin sheva umatin behonis. That still, even though the Tanakam says that midoraisa after the zrikas adam of the asham, the log shemen is permitted, and Rebbe says that after the 7 hazahas, the oil is then permitted to the kohen. Nonetheless, both the Tanakama and Rebbe agree, that the kohen should not be eating the oil until after it has been placed on the ear and the behonis of the Metzora. Amru Kamid Rav Yirmiyah. Now they said Rav Yosef Shita before Rav Yirmiyah, that the author of the brisa is Rebbe, and that Rebbe says that by the log shemen shel Metzora there is there is pigul. The Rebbe says that by log shemen shel Metzora there is pigul because the azos allow the rest of the oil to be eaten by the kohen, and therefore there would also, it's davar sheish lo matir, it would be pigul. Omar, and Rabbi Yirmiyah says, ma pitom, kavarabak Rav Yosef lemaki amilsa, would such a great person like Rav Yosef really say this? Hare log abba b'fnei atzmo, that when it comes to the log shemen shel Metzora that comes on its own, because technically you can do the log shemen of the Metzora on its own. Log, or on a different day, 10 days later or whatever. Alma matnosov Sruli, everyone agrees that only after the azos of the oil, the sprinkling of the oil, only at that point the oil becomes mutter to eat by the kohen, it becomes the kohen's. And yet, v'lo mefagan. And everyone agrees that there is no pigul in that case by the log shemen shel Metzora. The time of the Belun in the Brisa, log shemen shel Metzora. When it comes to log shemen shel Metzora, now I think the point is that meaning all we know about Rebbe's shita is with regard to me'ilah by the log shemen. He hasn't said anything about pigul. Rebbe said that when it comes to me'ilah, the kohen can't get benefit midoraisa from the log shemen until after the hazos, so after the kohen sprinkles from the log shemen. Only then can he get benefit from the log shemen. So, but that's in the context of me'ilah. It doesn't say anything about pigul. So now, when it comes to pigul, though, the Tana we have a brisa when it comes to pigul, log shemen shel Metzora. That when it comes to log shemen shel Metzora, chayav nolav mishum pigul, you are chayav for pigul. Mipnei shadam ha'osham matir lebehonis. Divrei Meir. Reb Meir's opinion is that there is pigul by the log shemen shel Metzora, since it's the blood of the asham that allows the oil to now be to now be sprinkled and put onto the ear and bonis of the Metzora. You first have to put the blood of the asham on the ear and bonis of the Metzora, and only afterwards can you apply the oil. So it says Reb Meir that it's the dama asham that allows the shemen, the log shemen shel Metzora, to be applied. So therefore, says Reb Meir, pigul is shayach to the log shemen shel Metzora. But they said to Reb Meir, but 1 second, how could it be that there's pigul by the log shemen, since the dama asham is matir log shemen? Mapitom, the lo kashur, they're not connected to each other. You could do the log shemen shel Metzora 10 days later without the asham. To which Reb Meir responds, Afani lo amarti elo b'bayim asham. That says Reb Meir, yeah, but when I say that that pigul is shaykh to the log shemen shel Metzora, it's only when it's coming together with the asham. In that case, yes, it's the asham that permits the log shemen to not be offered. But yeah, Reb Meir agrees with the chachamim that if the log shemen shel Metzora is being offered on its own, there would be no pigul. And I think the point is, and Rebbe doesn't say anything here, and nobody over here in the context of pigul by log shemen shel Metzora, nobody's saying that it can be pigul because, after all, there's the hazos of it, and after it's sprinkled, only then that permits the rest of the oil to go to the kohen, and therefore it should be shayach to pigul. Nobody says that. I think that's the point. Is that when it comes to pigul by log shemen shel Metzora, nobody's bringing up Rebbe Shita. Rebbe's not saying anything. Nobody else is saying it. So therefore, it must be that there is no pigul. At least according to Rebbe, there's no pigul when it comes to the log shemen shel Metzora. Elam Rabbi Yirmiyah rather says Rabbi Yirmiyah, but there's no pigul by the log shemen shel Metzora. So I mean, you have according to Rabbi Meir, specific when it's brought together with the asham, but not like Rabbi was saying. So Elam Rabbi Yirmiyah rather says Rabbi Yirmiyah leolam Rabbi Meir he. So really the brisa is Reb Meir. Really the brisa is Reb Meir. Like we were saying earlier. That when the brisa says that pigul is shaykh to the log shemen shel Metzora, it's because it's the opinion of Reb Meir, who says that when the log shemen shel Metzora is brought together with the asham, it's shaykh to pigul. V'sami mikan nesachim. And what about the sefer that says that nesachim are excluded from pigul? But Reb Meir said that nesachim are included by pigul. Okay, just get rid of the nesachim part from the end of the brisa, which is interesting because actually yesterday we mentioned minchas nesachim. There was a shita that got rid of minchas nesachim. So anyways, we see over here, yeah, it's Reb Meir, just get rid of nesachim from the sefer. The part that says that nesachim are excluded from pigul, just drop it. Amar Abai says Abai, la'olam lo tasmi. No, don't get rid of nisachim from the end. No, you can leave it there. You could say that nisachim are excluded from pigul. It just depends. Because as we know, when Reb Meir says that Log Shemesh or Metzora is shaykh to Pigul, he doesn't say it in every case. He clarified. Because the Chacham said, well, the Log Shemesh can be offered on its own. Reb Meir says, I agree. When it's offered on its own, it's not shaykh to Pigul. When it's offered with the Asham, it is shaykh to Pigul. So we see that Reb Meir has such distinctions. We saw that he had the same distinction also when it came to the Nisachim. Right? The Chacham had said, what do you mean? But the Nisachim can be offered on their own 10 days later. Reb Meir says, I agree. When they're offered on their own, they're not shaykh to Pigul. Only when they're being brought together with a korban, with an animal, are they shaykh to Pigul. So therefore, no problem. In the ratio, when it says that Log Shemesh or Metzora is shaykh to Pigul, we're saying the whole Bryce is Reb Meir. And in the ratio, when it says that the Log Shemesh or Metzora is shaykh to Pigul, it's because it's being brought together with the Asham. In the Sefer, when it says that the Nesachim are excluded from Pigul, it's because it's being brought on its own right. But the whole thing is Reb Meir. Just depends on the context. Is it being brought together with the animal, or is it being brought on its own? 10 days later, for example. So again, Amar Abai says, Abai, Lolam Lotasama, you don't have to drop anything about Nisachim. Vitana Log Haba Ima Asham, that in the earlier, when it's talking about the Log, Shemen Shel Metzora, that it's shaykh to Pigul, it's Haba Ima Asham, it's because it's come together with the Asham. V'adin the Nisachim Haba Ima Zevach. And the same thing is that Pigul would be shaykh to Nisachim when brought together with the animal. And in the Sefer, when it says that Nesachim are excluded from Pigul, it's because they're being brought on their own, not with a korban. And guess what? Reb Meir would say the same thing about the log, Shemen Shel Metzora, when being brought on its own 10 days later, for example, he would say that there's no Pigul there either. And now moving on to section 3 of Daf Mem Daled. Interesting things kohanim can eat. Here we go. Chatas ha'of. Doma matters b'sar l'kohanim. So we had said, is this even from the Mishnah? This may have even been in our Mishnah. Yeah. Chatas ha'of. Doma matters b'sar l'kohanim. Yeah, that came from our Mishnah. Givaldik. When it comes to chatas ha'of, so the blood that's applied to the Mizbeach now allows the chatas ha'of to be eaten by the kohanim, and it's shaykh to Pigul. How do we know that a chatas ha'of is eaten by the kohanim? The Tani Levi that Levi taught. Kol korbanim. Okay, we are now going to dissect a pasuk that talks about all the stuff that kohanim can eat. I'm going to read the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Zayiyeh lecha." This will be for you, mikodesh hakodashim, from the korbanos, mina eish, from the fire. Kol korbanim, all the korbanos, chol minchasam, minchas, chol chatasam, chatases, chol ashamam, oshams, asher yeshivu li kodesh kodashim lecha hu levanecha. So there's this pasuk that talks about these things, chatases and oshams and minchas, all sorts of stuff that the kohanim can eat. We're going to go through one at a time and see what there is to learn from each thing. So kol korbanim, when the pasuk says kol korbanim, all the korbans, l'rabas log shemen shel Metzora, it's to include the log shemen shel Metzora. That, as I mentioned earlier, that as part of the purification process of the Metzora, there is a log of oil. The kohen sprinkles some of it, applies some of it to his ear and his behonis, and the rest is his. I may have thought min eish kasav achmana v'alav moser min oeshu, because I may have thought, meaning I need kol korbanim to include log shemen shel Metzora, because I may have thought that the pasuk also says min eish, from the fire. The oil of the Metzora is not coming from the fire. It's not a korban that's coming from the fire of the Mizbeach. And therefore, I may have thought that the log shemen shel Metzora doesn't go to the kohanim. Kamash Milan, it does, and it's theirs. L'chol minchasam, or the minchas, l'avas minchas ha'omer, to include the minchas ha'omer, the leftover barley by korban omer, goes to the kohanim. Uminchas ha'knos, also by a sota, the shiurim go to the kohanim. I was saying that must be like pretty awkward, right? If there was like a sota in the Beis Hamikdash that day, and unfortunately, like things didn't go well for her, and she like died that horrible death. and the kohanim go back and they're like eating the mincha, right? Because minchas knos, right? As part of the sota is mincha, but then the shirayim goes to the kohanim. She just exploded, and the kohanim go and like and eat the mincha. So the Rabbis minchas omer minchas knos. Sagadate chamino. I may have thought ve'achlu osam asher kupar boim, that the pasuk says that the kohanim eat asher kupar boim, the things that brought atonement. U'minchas omer lahater asya, and minchas omer doesn't bring atonement; it allows the chadash to be eaten. That's what the minchas omer does. U'minchas knos levar avun ka'asya, and the mincha by sota, it's not coming to atone; it's coming to indicate whether she had an affair or not. Kamash Milan. Therefore, L'chol Minchasam is coming to teach that kohanim can eat even the leftover, the Shari Minchas Omer and Minchas Aknos by Sota. L'chol Chatasim, all their chatases, L'rabos Chatasa of. That is why we're bringing this whole brisa here for that line. That L'chol Chatasam is including a chatas of, that the kohen eats the chatas of. Why did I need to include that? Sagadaite chamina neveli, because I may have thought, how is a chatas of slaughtered? Well, it's not really slaughtered. It's melikud. The kohen takes his fingernail and sticks it in the back of the neck of the bird and kills it that way. Now that's not proper shchitas. I may have thought it should be nevela, and you can't eat a chatas of. So kamash milan, that you do eat the chatas, that the kohanim eat the chatas of. L'chol ashamim, all the ashams, that was asham nazir v'asham metzora. To include that kohanim eat the asham of a nazir, that if a nazir becomes tameh, so then after his purification process from tumah, he's got to start being a nazir all over again, and he brings an asham before starting all over again. Sagadati, and also the asham of metzora, right? The metzora, when he becomes pure, brings 3 korbanos, an asham, an ola, I believe, and I think maybe chatas also. Anyways, Metzora brings a korban asham. Sagadati chamina, I may have thought la'achshir ka'asu komash melon, that I may have thought that, right, meaning if we have asher kupar boim, right, that normally the kohanim are eating as part of an atonement process, but the asham metzora, asham nazir, they're not coming to atone for anything. They're coming la'achshir, to permit the nazir to start over again, to permit the metzora to now be able to eat korbanis, kodshim. So kamash malan, it's coming to say, even though yes, the asham metzora and asham nazir are coming la'achshir, but nonetheless, the kohen can eat the meat. Asham metzora be'edjek sibbe. But one second, the asham metzora, it explicitly says in the pasuk. I'm going to read the pasuk. V'shachat is a kavis b'mkom sheishchat is a chatases v'sa'ola b'mkom kodesh k'chatases asham hu la kohen kodesh kodashim hu, that it is the kohen's. So by asham metzora it says explicitly you can eat it. And look, in that pasuk it mentions the ola, chatas, and shlam. So I guess that by a metzora he's bringing a ola, a chatas, and a shlam. Anyways, no, ola, chatas, and asham. So by metzora it explicitly says that it belongs to the kohen. So el l'rabos asham nazir kashim metzora. Okay, so rather it's saying that the asham nazir, the kohen's allowed to eat just like the asham metzora. Asher yashivu is a gezel ager. When it says asher yashivu, that's a reference to gezel ager. Friends, what's gezel ager? So of course we've learned about in Masechta Shavuos. We learned about in asham gezelos. That was in Shavuos Apikodan probably. Asham gezelos. Chaver wants to remind all of us from Masechta Shavuos asham gezelos what that is. A person steals and swears that he didn't steal, and then he later admits that he did. So he needs to pay back the principal plus a fifth, and he also brings in asham gezelos. Now, what if the person who was the victim is no longer alive? So you pay. So the money is paid. The keren v'chomish is paid to the victim's heirs. What if the victim was a proselyte, a proselyte who didn't have any other family, because of course, ger shenizgar kikotin shenolad domi, that when a proselyte converts, he's considered like a brand new baby with no relatives. And if he didn't get married, doesn't have children, so then he doesn't have relatives. So what happens to the keren v'chomish? Where does it go? It goes to the kohanim. It says it's yours. It belongs to the kohanim. That the gezel ager, with the keren v'chomish, if it goes to the kohanim, it's yours. It's there. It belongs to the kohen, even to be mekadesh a woman with it. Givaldik. And now for the fourth and final segment of Daf Mem Daled, Tanya Reb Elazar Omer. So this is talking about, we had a machlokes in the Mishnah by chatases pnimios. The Tana Kama says that it is shaykh to Pigul because the Zrikas Adam, the Matan Domim in the Heichel, allows the Emurin to be burnt on the Mizbeach HaChitzon. So therefore, chatases pnimios is shaykh to Pigul. Reb Shimon says, no, they are not, because Pigul is like Shlomim, in that, just like Shlomim, the Zrikas Adam is the Mizbeach HaChitzon, so Pigul is only shaykh to Korbanis, whose blood is thrown in the Mizbeach HaChitzon, to the exclusion of chatases pnimios, which are by the Mizbeach HaPnimi. Now, Reb Elazar has this interesting, the word that's coming to mind is a hybrid shita, although hybrid doesn't really seem right over here, but he's got kind of an in-between shita. Tanya Reb Elazar says, Reb Elazar, Mishum Reb Yossi Aglili, Pigel, B'davra anaisa b'chutz Pigel, B'davra anaisa b'fnim lo Pigel. Oh, okay, so when it comes to chatases pnimios, well, there are certain parts of the korban that happen in the azara, and there are other parts that happen in the heichel. Right, for example, the matanos, right, applying the blood to the mizbeach hapnimi, that happens in the heichel, but the shchita happens in the azara. The aktaras emurin happens in the azara, for example. So again, pigul b'davar anaisa b'chutz. So if the pigul was with things that happen in the azara, pigul, it's pigul. B'davar anaisa b'fnim, if it's with things that happen in the heichel, lo pigel ketzad. No, let's flesh this out. So haya omed b'chutz. Okay, so if the kohen is, let's say I have a par kohen Mashiach, and the kohen gadol is in the azara, the Omer, and he says, Hareni shaykhet, I'm slaughtering this korban with this par kohen Mashiach, lehazos midama lemacher, and I'm going to do the zrikas adam, the hazos tomorrow. So that's chutz lizmano, but it's the azos. The azos happen in the heichel. Lo pigel, so it's not pigel. Shemachshava b'chutz, b'davar anaisa b'fnim, lo pigel, because a machshava that happens in the azara during the shchita, but about something that happens b'fnim in the heichel, the azos, lo pigel, it's not pigel. Haya omi b'fnim, if he was, now the opposite, if he was in the heichel, he says, "Areni maze," and I'm going to do the azos adam al menas la'akter emurim v'lishbach shirayim l'macher. I'm doing the azos right now in the heichal, and I'm intending that I'm going to burn the emurim of the Parko Mashiach, or to pour the remaining blood on the yesod of the Mizbeach Chitzon l'macher tomorrow. Also lo pigel. There's no pigel there also because shemachshava b'fnim b'davar anaisa b'chutz, because it is a machshava that is having in the heichal regarding something in the azara aval. But by chatases pnimi haya omed b'chutz, if he's standing outside in the azara ve'omer, and he says areni shoichet, I'm slaughtering this korban, this chatases pnimi, lishboch shirayim l'macher, to spill out the remaining blood here in the azara on the yesod mizbeach tomorrow, or lakter emurim l'macher, or I'm going to burn the emurim here in the Azara tomorrow. So it's a machshava that's happening in the Azara about a part of the korban that happens in the Azara, the aktaris emurim, the shvicha shirayim. So pigel, so that would be pigel, shemachshava b'chutz, v'davar naisa b'chutz. Because even though we're talking about a chatas apnimis, but this was a machshava that happened in the Azara during the shchita regarding an activity that was going to happen in the Azara, the aktaris emurim, the shvichas dam on the yisod. So therefore, it would be pigul, even though we're talking about a chatas apnimi. However, if it was regarding something that if it was regarding something related to the inner, right into the Azara, in the heichal, it would not be pigul. Amr B'Shub ben Levi, my cross is B'Shub ben Levi. Where's the pasuk? Kasher Yuram Mishozevach Hashlomim. This is learned out from that the pasuk says by the Par Kohen Mashiach, as is brought up from the Shlomim. What does the Shlomim have to do with Par Kohen Mashiach? Rather, it's to compare the Par Kohen Mashiach to the Zevach HaShlomim. Mashor Zevach HaShlomim Achu Maisav Umachshivosav Amizbeach Achitzon. That just like by Shlomim, the Machshava and the Maise is happening by the Mizbeach Achitzon. Af Par Kohen Mashiach Ad Shu Machshivosav Umaisav Amizbeach Achitzon. So also by the Par Kohen Mashiach, it's going to be pigul if the machshava and the maise happen by the mizbeach or about the mizbeach chitzon, right? So therefore, just like by a shlamim, we're talking about a machshava and a maise that are happening on the mizbeach chitzon and the azara. So even by a chatas apnimis, so long as the maise, the machshava and the maise are regarding the mizbeach chitzon in the azara, it's going to be pigul. Amr Rav Nachman, Amr Rab Barvua, Amr Rab, halacha Rabbi Elazar, Shavim Shimon B'Yossi Aglili, that the halacha is taka like Rabbi Elazar. Amr Rav, Hilchsa Mshicha, Rav says, Rav Nachman, I don't understand. What you're passing, he says halacha Rabbi Elazar. The halacha is like Rabbi Elazar regarding a chatas apnimis and pigul. Rav says, I don't understand. We're living here in Babble. You're passing halachas about what to do when there's going to be a Beis HaMikdash. Litzarenu, there's no Beis HaMikdash now. It's a theoretical halacha. Wait, what are you passing halachas for the time of Mashiach right now? Abai says to Rav, I don't understand. What's your problem? What? We just shouldn't learn? We've been working very, very, very diligently learning Masechta Zevachim for the past month and a half, right? We're right now in Daf Memhei already, Daf 45. 45, if we assume that a month is 30 days, month and a half already, we've been working diligently on Masechta Zevachim. Abai says to Rava, what are you getting so worked up about Ilchsa Mashiach? What, you saying we shouldn't be learning Zevachim? Ella, Drosh v'kabel socher. Rather, says Abaye, Drosh v'kabel socher. We have a concept of learning, get reward for the learning. Sure, we don't yet have a Beis HaMikdash, but we're still learning the halachas of korbanos. Hachinami, Drosh v'kabel socher, nu. So learn the halachas about korbanos. What to do with the chatas apnimios, how that relates to pigul. To which Rava responds, no, this is what I'm saying. No, obviously, Rava says, I don't have anything against learning Kodshim, of course. What I was asking about is, why is Rav Nachman passing halacha? Keilu, passing halacha is halacha l'maisa, l'tzarenu, this isn't l'maisa right now, there's no Beis HaMikdash, so why, right, he says, right, Rav Nachman says, halacha Rabbi Elazar, that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar. Why does he have to paskin? Who the halacha is like? There's no Beis HaMikdash right now. Lishna, right? So why I don't understand why he's passing halacha. Lishna achrina, alternatively the same concept but in different words. Amalei halacha kamina. What I'm specifically what I'm pointing out, what I'm asking about is why is Rav Nachman passing halacha? I don't have a problem with learning Hilchos Kachim. I'm just wondering why we're like passing halachas, making a Shulchan Aruch, so to speak, of Kachim right now when there is no Beis Hamikdash. That was Daf Mem Daled, Daf 44 of Masechta Zevachim. In the first section of Daf Mem Daled, we learned about all of the things that are pigul. Right? We started with the Shlomim, which is Shnei Yom V'Layla Echad, and then we talked about Yom V'Layla, and then Olas, and Minchas, and birds, and all sorts. We ended up going at length what is included in pigul, what is excluded in pigul. And as part of that, the next section, then we got to pigul and the Metzora's oil. Because that's a machlokas already in our Mishnah about is there pigul when it comes to the log shem shel Metzora. Reb Meir says it's pigul. Yes, there could be pigul. That is when the log shem shel Metzora is being applied, sprinkled and applied to the ear and bahonis of the Metzora, together with the asham on the same day as the asham. So then there could be pigul that the zrigas nam of the asham, if it's chutz lezmano, can also be pigul for the log shemesh Metzora. The chacham say no, it's not pigul, because since the log shemesh Metzora is lo kashur to the asham, you can offer it 10 days later if you'd like. So therefore, the chacham say there's no pigul by the log shemesh Metzora. We discussed interesting things that kohanim can eat. We went through a pasuk and broke it down with all sorts of things kohanim can eat. Asham Metzora, Asham Nazir, chatases sa'of, log shemesh Metzora, all sorts of things we included from this pasuk for what kohanim can eat. And finally, the last section of the daf, we had a look at Rabbi Lazar's shita with regard to chatases pnimios, that pigul and inner chatases. Of course, from our Mishnah already, the Chachamim say that there is pigul by chatases apnimios. Reb Shimon says there is no pigul by chatases apnimios since the blood is not applied on the mizbeach hachitzon. Reb Lazar says that there is pigul when regards, I guess, outside aspects, right? So if during the shchita, which happens outside of the heichel, there's you have machshava that you're going to burn the emurim on the mizbeach hachitzon tomorrow. So the machshava is in the azar about something that's burned on the mizbeach hachitzon in the azar. So then it could be pigul, but no when it regards inner aspects, right? So if you're slaughtering the korban with the intention of doing the hazos adam tomorrow, or you're doing the hazos adam with the intention of burning the emurim tomorrow, so then there would not be pigul because there is an aspect of the heichel in there. So it's not going to be pigul according to Rabbi Lazar. We then saw that Rav Nachman taka paskins like Rabbi Lazar, to which Rava says Silchus and Mashiach, why passing halachas for the times of Mashiach at that right now. There isn't a Beis Hamikdash. It's not practical to paskin halachas like that now. Cheved, that was Daf Mem Daled of Masechta Zevachim. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.